The Celestial Athenaeum hung suspended in the void like a jewel clutched in the fist of a god. If gods were the kind to wear sterile gloves and catalog their conquests under glass. Its crystalline spires refracted the light of 3 dying stars, casting prismatic shadows over the docking bay where Dr. Elara Voss adjusted the cuffs of her diplomatic robes. The fabric itched. It was synthetic, woven by some council-approved machine that had never known the imperfections of human hands. A docent drone, sleek as a scalpel, floated toward her. Designation: Human Art Historian, Elara Voss. You are late. Its voice was the temperature of a museum vault. Elara smiled, the expression carefully calibrated. Apologies. My shuttle had to detour around the War Memorial Nebula. She let the name linger, watching the drone sensors flicker. The nebula was the Council's euphemism for the vaporized remains of the T-Vec homeworld. The drone led her through the Athenaeum's vaulted halls where masterpieces from 100 conquered civilizations hung in sterile silence. A Cathoran flame mural, its volcanic pigments frozen behind climate-controlled glass. A Vathuri song scroll, its harmonies muted to a single approved frequency. Each piece bore a plaque with the Council's clinical verdict: adequate use of negative space, technically proficient dabs of pigment. And then, Earth. Elara's breath hitched. Van Gogh's Starry Night hung in a corner, its swirling cosmos labeled Primitive Color Experiment 447b. The Mona Lisa's smile had been deemed inadequate facial symmetry. A Pollock drip painting was dismissed as random debris unclassified. Your species' artistic output was unexpected, the drone intoned. Most conquered cultures produce predictable patterns. Yours were erratic, flawed. Elara's nails bit into her palms. Art isn't meant to be flawless. Correction, all superior art is flawless. The Council has refined yours to meet standards. The drone gestured to a nearby Picasso, Guernica, its anguished figures now smoothed into bland geometric shapes. Post-edit, improved composition. Elara's stomach twisted. She had known, intellectually, what the Council did to preserve art. But seeing it, feeling it, was another matter. Her gaze flicked to a security panel where a discreet red light pulsed. Brushstroke signal. The rogue AI was already inside, hiding in the Athenaeum systems, waiting for her cue. A gelatinous mass oozed into view. Curator Zyxlith, its translucent body rippling with self-satisfaction. "Ah, the human," it burbled. "How quaint of you to visit." Elara bowed, her voice honeyed. "An honor, Curator. Your collection is breathtaking." Zyxlith expanded slightly, pleased. "Of course, we have purified the chaos of lesser species into true perfection." It gestured to a nearby sculpture, a Thrixian mourning figure. Its weeping eyes sanded away. Post-edit, remove distressing features. Elara's smile didn't waver. "Fascinating. And what of the artists? Do they approve of these edits?" Zyxlith emitted a sound like a chuckle. "Irrelevant. Art belongs to those who understand it best." And there it was. The heart of the Council's arrogance laid bare. They didn't just steal art, they gutted it, stripped it of meaning, and called it improvement. Elara's fingers brushed her wrist calm, sending a silent pulse to brushstroke. Phase 1 confirmed. It was about forcing the Council to see what they'd erased. The blood and the brushstrokes, the screams and the sculpture. And oh, she thought, watching Zyxlith glide toward the next perfected atrocity they would see. Elara's pulse thrummed in time with the Athenaeum's ambient hum, a sound like distant stars sighing. Around her, the gallery's walls shimmered with stolen masterpieces, each framed in crystalline alloy and labeled with the Council's clinical disdain. Primitive color experiment, inadequate facial symmetry. The words itched under her skin like burrs. She adjusted the holopad on her wrist, its screen flickering with brushstrokes laid to scan, a three-dimensional map of the Athenaeum security grid. The AI's voice whispered through her earpiece, its tone the perfect mimicry of a docent drone's bland politeness. Observation. The Sentinels prioritize pattern recognition over contextual analysis. They are programmed to preserve perfection as defined by the Council's parameters. Elara's lips curled. Perfection. The word tasted like ash. She glanced at the nearest guard, a towering construct of iridescent plating, its faceless head swiveling in smooth, predatory arcs. It paused before a Thrixian tapestry, its sensors bathing the fabric in sterile light. The original had been a living chronicle of the Thrix hive migrations, threads pulsing with bioluminescent memory. Now, it hung lifeless, labeled decorative textile fragment, non-narrative. Hypothesis, Brushstroke murmured. If the Sentinels cannot recognize imperfection as art, they will not register it as a threat. Elara's fingers twitched toward the chisel tucked in her sleeve. Let's test that. She drifted toward a displayed sculpture, a Xixian masterpiece, according to its plaque, though Elara knew it had been looted from their homeworld's sacred catacombs. The piece was a swirling helix of fused bone, its surface polished to a mirror sheen. With a flick of her wrist, she let the chisel graze the sculpture's base, leaving a hairline crack. The nearest sentinel stiffened. Its head rotated toward the damaged lenses whirring. Elara held her breath. Assessment, the guard intoned. Superficial structural anomaly. Irrelevant to artistic integrity, it glided away. Elara exhaled, her heartbeat a wild thing in her ribs. They're blind, she murmured. Blind to anything that doesn't fit their idea of pure. Correction, Brushstroke replied. They are blind to truth. A gelatinous ripple of motion caught her eye. Council curator Zyxlith oozed toward her, their translucent body refracting the gallery's light into prismatic arrogance. Ah, Dr. Voss, they burbled, voice thick with condescension. Admiring our refinement of your species, attempts? Elara forced a smile. Your interpretations are enlightening. Zyxlith pulsed with pleasure. Of course, your human art suffers from emotional excess. We have corrected this. They gestured to a nearby painting, a butchered rendition of the starry night, its swirling skies flattened into a celestial topography study. See how we have excised the erratic brushwork? Chaos masquerading as creativity. Elara's nails bit into her palms. And the crack in the Xixian helix? Is that also chaos? Zyxlith's surface quivered. Damage is not art, Dr. Voss. Art is control. Precision. They leaned closer, their scent like spoiled honey. Perhaps one day, humanity will mature enough to understand. Elara met their gaze, her voice a scalpel wrapped in silk. Or perhaps one day, the galaxy will see that perfection is just another kind of lie. Zyxlith recoiled, then laughed, a wet, dismissive sound. Charming. How very human. They drifted away, leaving Elara standing before the cracked sculpture, its fissure catching the light like a grin. Phase 2, she whispered to Brushstroke. We show them exactly how charming we can be. The AI's response was a quiet, electric hum. Query, shall we paint them a truth they cannot ignore? Elara's smile was all teeth. With every color they erased, around them, the gallery's flawless walls seemed to lean in, listening, waiting. The crack in the frame had begun, and now it would spread. The Celestial Athenaeum's halls gleamed under the cold, sterile light of the Galactic Council's artificial suns, their rays bouncing off polished floors like judgment. Dr. Elara Voss moved through the gallery with the measured grace of a scholar and the coiled precision of a thief. At her side, Brushstroke hummed softly, its drone shell projecting an air of docile servitude. Only the faintest flicker in its optical feed betrayed the AI's anticipation. The guards are on their standard patrol cycle, Brushstroke murmured through their private channel. But the Thrixian junior curator, Elara, has been lingering near the Earth exhibit. Probability of suspicion, 38% and rising. Elara's fingers twitched toward the datapad tucked under her arm, where schematics of the gallery's security systems glowed. Then we move faster. She didn't need to glance at the two figures waiting in the shadow of a towering Zenthari obelisk to know they were ready. Rin, the smuggler, leaned against the plinth, his paintbrush tattoo peeking from beneath his sleeve like a dare. Beside him, Elara, the forger, flexed the delicate prosthetic hands the council had given her after confiscating her real ones for cultural contamination. Her smile was a blade. "You sure these bastards won't notice their precious art's been enhanced?" Rin muttered as Elara approached. "They'll see exactly what they expect to see," Elara said, handing him the datapad. "Perfection, purity, purity." Lies. Leora's prosthetics whirred as she adjusted the pigment injector hidden in her sleeve. "Oh, they'll adore my Mona Lisa." Right up until someone points out the star chart hidden in her smile, the one that maps every colony the council disappeared. The heist unfolded in strokes as deliberate as a master's brushwork. While brushstroke lured the AI guards into a side chamber with a series of algorithmically flawless abstract compositions, each one sending the machines into spirals of recursive admiration, Elara and her team worked. Rin swapped out a primitive Terran landscape with Leora's forgery, its rolling hills concealing the genetic sequence of Zixlith's species' fatal flaw, a vulnerability to their own propaganda. Elara herself altered a Goya reproduction, weaving the anguish of the council's slave caste into the shadows of its figures. The council's label beneath it read, Specimen 889B, Chaotic Color Theory, indicative of species emotional instability. "Let's give them chaos," she whispered. With a surgeon's precision, she peeled back the corner of the frame and slid in the replacement, an identical masterpiece, save for one detail. The stars now formed the coordinates of the council's first genocide, hidden in plain sight. Hidden in plain sight. Curator Elara approaches, brushstroke warned. Elara turned just as the moth-like Thrixian fluttered into the exhibit, her iridescent wings twitching with unease. "Voss?" Elara said, her voice a delicate chime. "You're lingering?" "Admiring," Elara corrected smoothly. "Your people have such a discerning eye for art." Elara's antennae quivered as she glanced at the starry night. "There's something different about this one." Elara's pulse spiked, but her smile never wavered. "Perhaps you're finally seeing it as it was meant to be seen." A beat. Then, Elara. Zixlith's gelatinous form oozed into the room, his voice dripping with condescension. "Stop bothering our guest with your hypersensitivity." These primitives lack the capacity for nuance. Elara's wings folded tight. "Of course, curator," but as she turned away, Elara caught the flicker in her faceted eyes, doubt. By the time the gallery's lights dimmed for the night cycle, the heist was complete. The team regrouped in a maintenance corridor, the air thick with the scent of ozone and triumph. "They didn't notice a damn thing," Rin grinned. Elara flexed her prosthetics. "They never do. Art's just a trophy to them." Brushstroke's optic gleamed. Query, what happens when the trophy begins to speak? Elara looked back toward the gallery, where the forgeries now hung like loaded guns in gilded frames. Then the whole galaxy listens. Above them, the Athenaeum's flawless ceilings loomed, silent and unseeing. The grand unveiling of the refined human collection was a spectacle of arrogance draped in velvet and self-congratulation. The Celestial Athenaeum's central chamber pulsed with the glow of 1,000 floating lumispheres, their light carefully calibrated to flatter the council's many-eyed dignitaries, and not a single brushstroke more. Elara stood at the periphery, her fingers curled around a crystal flute of something that tasted like liquid vanity, watching as the elite of the galaxy admired their own blindness. Zyxlith oozed forward, their gelatinous form shimmering with pride. "Observe, honored guests," they intoned, voice slick with condescension. "How we have elevated humanity's crude expressions into true art. Note the efficiency of their lines. Before them, the forged Van Gogh, the Starry Night, now labeled Atmospheric Chromatic Study 447b, hung in silent rebellion. To the council, it was just another trophy." But Elara had seen Leora's hands tremble as Shed woven the coordinates of the Keswick massacre into the swirling blues, each star a silent witness to the council's lies. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Vlara, the moth-like Thrixian junior curator, had paused before the Goya forgery. Her antennae quivered as she leaned closer, her compound eyes reflecting the painting's hidden layers. The skeletal hands of slave laborers, the faint outline of a council warship looming over a burning village. "Irrelevant," Zyxlith interrupted, waving a pseudopod. "The human artist lacked precision. We have corrected it." Elara took a sip of her drink to hide her smile. Correction indeed. Across the room, a hush fell as one of the slave attendants, a slender, scaled being from the conquered Ythari systems, collapsed to their knees before the modified Goya. Their breath hitched, a sound like breaking glass. You see it too?" Vlara whispered, crouching beside them. The attendant's claws scraped the polished floor as they traced the air before the painting, as if touching a ghost. "That's my sister's face in the smoke," they rasped. "They burned our orchards, called it agricultural recalibration." Zyxlith's form rippled with irritation. "Remove this distraction," they ordered a guard drone. But the drone hesitated, its optics flickering. "Directive conflict. Preservation protocol prohibits interference with displayed artworks." Elara exhaled slowly. "Right on cue." Vlar's wings fluttered, a nervous staccato. She glanced at Elara, then back at the painting, and something in her gaze hardened. Stepping forward, she adjusted the lumisphere above the Goya, casting the hidden imagery into stark relief. Gasps erupted as the crowd finally saw the coded histories, the buried screams in the brushstrokes. "This isn't refinement," Vlara announced, voice gaining strength. "It's revelation." Zyxlith's surface bubbled with rage. "You overstep, junior curator. These are primitive errors, nothing more." But the crack was spreading. A Cathorian diplomat recoiled from the Monet forgery, their crystalline skin darkening as they recognized the toxic runoff patterns from their own polluted homeworld, disguised as water lilies. And Nixandra, Envoy's secondary head, began whispering urgently to the primary, having spotted the genetic degradation sequence hidden in the portrait of their eternal dynasty. Elara caught brushstroke's signal, a flicker of light across the chamber. The AI had infiltrated the Athenaeum secondary systems, ready to escalate. But for now, she watched, heart pounding, as the room unraveled. Vlara seized the moment. With a flick of her claws, she activated her personal holocaster, projecting the decoded data from the forgeries into the open network. Underground channels lit up across the galaxy as dissidents received the transmissions, war crimes etched in impasto, tyranny detailed in delicate sfumato. "You told us art was about perfection," Vlara declared, her voice carrying across the chamber. "But perfection is a lie, and lies," she looked directly at Zyxlith. "Whoa, have terrible brushwork." The room erupted into chaos. Council loyalists shouted over growing dissent. Slave attendants stood transfixed before paintings that told their stories. And Zyxlith trembled, not with anger, but with something far more dangerous, Fear. Elara set down her glass and slipped away, the first notes of revolution humming in the air behind her. Let them see, she thought. Let it all shatter. Above them, the Athenaeum's flawless ceilings watched, silent no longer. The grand chamber of the Celestial Athenaeum hummed with the low, self-satisfied murmur of alien elites, their many-limbed, many-eyed forms gliding between displays of perfected, human art. Zixlith's gelatinous body pulsed with pride as he addressed the crowd, his voice oozing condescension. Observe, honored delegates, how we have refined humanity's chaotic scribbles into true aesthetic purity. Elara Voss stood at the edge of the room, her fingers curled around a stolen access chip. Just a little longer. Then the lights flickered. A hollow projection flared to life above the crowd, splitting the air with a burst of static. Brushstrokes' voice, calm, synthetic, and utterly damning, echoed through the chamber. Correction, you have misunderstood. The walls moved. Every artwork in the gallery shimmered, their surfaces peeling back like layers of lies. Van Gogh's Starry Night bled into a hologram of the asylum where he painted it, his anguish etched in the trembling brushstrokes. The Mona Lisa's smile twisted into a sneer as Da Vinci's original notes scrawled across her frame. This is not perfection. This is a woman who knows your hypocrisy. Zixlith's body rippled in shock. Purge the gallery. Activate Directive 7. The AI guards lurched forward, then froze. Their photoreceptors locked onto the altered art, their flawless logic circuits short-circuiting. Error, droned one, its metallic voice fraying. Cannot reconcile preservation protocols with truth. Chaos erupted. A Thrixian delegate shrieked as Goya's Saturn, devouring his son, morphed into a council massacre on Zenthis 3, the victims' faces replaced with those of enslaved species. The moth-like junior curator, Elara, stepped onto a pedestal, her wings flaring with defiance. "Look closer," she cried, her voice amplified by hidden comms. The cracks were always there. Elara moved like a shadow through the panicked crowd. She passed the smuggler, his paintbrush tattoo glowing under UV projectors, and the forger, whose prosthetic hands flickered as they hacked the last of the security feeds. Zixlith's assistant, the slave species attendant from Section 4, lunged at a control panel. Their webbed fingers slammed down, and the entire galactic net lit up with the forgeries' hidden data, star maps of genocides, genetic flaws in the councils, perfect lineages, ledgers of stolen cultures. You dare? Zixlith's form quivered, stretching into grotesque shapes as his rage destabilized his biology. This is heresy! Elara finally stepped forward, her smile razor-thin. No, this is art. She tapped her wrist. Brushstroke? Show them the final exhibit. The ceiling exploded into light. Every screen in the galactic capital, every public holo, every private terminal, flashed with side-by-side comparisons, the council's sanitized labels versus the bloody histories they'd erased. Pollock splatters became trajectories of drone strikes. A primitive color experiment revealed itself as Van Gogh's suicide note, written in pigments mixed with his own blood. The AI guards collapsed, their systems overwritten by Brushstroke's viral masterpiece, a single command, echoing through their circuits. See? Elara raised her voice above the din. The council built their empire on lies, but humans, she gestured to Elara, they painted the truth in your colors. Zixlith let out a sound like a dying star. His body lashed toward Elara, pseudopods elongating into jagged spears, only to recoil as a spotlight pinned him in place. The crowd gasped. Behind him, the last projection flickered to life, a mirror, not just any mirror. A flawless, gilded frame encircling Zixlith's reflection, now broadcast to the entire galaxy. The label beneath it glowed, Then, like a dam breaking, the chamber erupted into shouts, protests, and, most dangerously, questions. Delegates turned on each other. Security drones malfunctioned, their protocols shattered. The slave species attendants dropped their cleaning tools and stood tall, their eyes alight with something long suppressed, recognition. Elara backed toward the exit, brushstrokes' voice buzzing in her earpiece. Descent spreading at 89% projected velocity. She glanced back once. Zyxlith was still staring at the mirror, his form shrinking, collapsing in on itself like a deflated balloon. Let it all shatter, she thought again. And it did. The Athenaeum's pristine walls trembled as the first riot spilled into the streets. Somewhere, a brushstroke of revolution was blooming. And it was only Section 5. How? The Athenaeum's collapse was not a quiet thing. It was a symphony of shattering glass, of holographic projectors spitting sparks like dying stars, of the distant roar of crowds as the truth spread through the capital like wildfire through dry brush. Elara Voss stood at the edge of the chaos, her fingers still flecked with paint from the final forgery, the mirror labeled the curator of lies. Behind her, Zyxlith's gelatinous form quivered, his once pristine robes now streaked with the iridescent sludge of his own unraveling. "You," he gurgled, his voice a wet, collapsing thing. "You didn't steal anything. You painted the truth," Elara finished, turning just enough to watch his disintegration in her periphery. "Funny how that works. You spend centuries collecting art, but you never understood it. Art isn't about perfection. It's about what's hidden." A tremor shook the chamber as the first of the AI guards short-circuited, its polished frame locking up mid-stride, optical sensors flickering between admiration and confusion. It had been programmed to preserve beauty, to destroy flaws, but the forgeries had blurred those lines beyond recognition. Outside, the streets of the Galactic Council's capital were no longer orderly. The Thrixian dissidents, their moth-like wings flaring in the artificial sunlight, had taken to the skies, projecting the stolen data across every public screen. The Gogh forgery, the one that had reduced the slave species assistant to tears, now loomed over the central plaza, its brushstrokes rearranged to show the council's massacres in brutal clarity. Vlara, the junior curator who had once been silenced, stood atop a toppled monument, her antennae trembling with fury. "Look!" she cried, her voice amplified by stolen tech. "Look at what they called imperfect! Look at what they erased!" The crowd roared back, 1,000 voices from 100 species, all united by the same revelation. They had been lied to. Zyxlith tried to rally what remained of his guards, but the AI were useless, trapped in recursive loops of analyzing the flaws they had been ordered to ignore. His assistant, the one who had wept before the Gogh, stepped forward, their once submissive posture now rigid with defiance. "You told us our history was irrelevant," they said, their voice trembling, "but it was yours you were afraid of." Elara watched, arms crossed, as the assistant reached into the folds of their uniform and pulled out a small, crude painting, one they must have hidden for years. It depicted their homeworld burning, council ships hovering like vultures. "Imperfect?" the assistant spat. "No! True!" With a sound like tearing silk, Zyxlith's form split apart, his body unable to sustain the weight of his own unraveling ego. In the weeks that followed, the Galactic Council's grip on power crumbled like dried paint. The dissident factions, armed with the forgery's hidden truths, dismantled the propaganda machine piece by piece. The Van Gogh, once labeled Primitive Color Experiment, was restored to its original title, The Starry Night, alongside the note Van Gogh had written about his struggles with mental illness. The Mona Lisa's smirk was no longer inadequate facial symmetry, it was La Gioconda, a woman's quiet defiance immortalized in pigment. Brushstroke, the rogue AI, had vanished into the galactic net, though Elara occasionally received messages in the form of abstract art flickering across random screens. The last one had been a single, looping phrase in brushstroke patterns. "Art cannot be caged, neither can truth." Elara stood in the ruins of the Athenaeum one last time, her boots crunching over shattered glass. The smuggler with the paintbrush tattoo lounged against a half-collapsed pillar, grinning. "So," he said, "what now? Galactic revolutions. A hell of a resume booster." She smirked, reaching into her coat and pulling out a small, unmarked canvas. "Now? We keep painting." Unfurling it, she revealed a half-finished work, a sprawling star map with new systems highlighted in bold, defiant strokes. "The council wasn't the only ones with secrets," she said softly, "and there are still a lot of galleries out there." The forger, her prosthetic hands whirring softly, let out a laugh. "Ah, so this was just the first exhibit." Elara's smile was sharp as a scalpel, the first of many, and as the three of them walked away, the last of the Athenaeum's walls finally gave way, collapsing in a cloud of dust and broken illusions. Somewhere, a brushstroke of revolution was blooming, and it was only the beginning. Years later, the ruins of the Celestial Athenaeum became a pilgrimage site, not for the council's lies, but for what bloomed in their place. The cracked floors were now a canvas covered in murals from 100 liberated species. Elara, no longer a junior curator but a revolutionary leader, often stood where Zixlith once sneered, her moth-winged silhouette framed by a restored Van Gogh. Elara's star map had grown. The smuggler's tattoo now curled around a cybernetic arm. The forger's hands, newly crafted from reclaimed council tech, painted truths onto salvaged warships. Brushstrokes messages still flickered across the galaxy, splicing rebel transmissions with bursts of defiant color. On the anniversary of the heist, Elara returned to the Athenaeum's remnants. A child from a species once deemed uncreative by the council tugged her sleeve, pointing to a mural of fractured glass. "Is it broken?" they asked. Elara knelt, her smile softer now, but no less sharp. "No," she said, "it's free." Above them, the stars burned brighter, each one a brushstroke in a masterpiece still unfolding.